welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing a new art journal page with you. It has been quite some time since I made something in my journal, but I finally decided to pull it back out again today. I made a quite simple piece here, but if you would like to see how it's made, then just keep on watching. The first thing I do here is to tape the middle in order to keep my journal together. The pages get a bit heavy and the products I put on them can sometimes weaken the binding, so by taping it I increase the chance of the journal staying together. I'm just using some cheap old painter's tape here, but it has a strange texture on it that makes paint and ink sort of just roll off it. So I would suggest using something with a little more porous surface unless you're after that resisting look. Then I'm using a stencil together with texture paste in order to get some dimension to the page. But as you can see here, my jar had unfortunately dried up and was too thick to do anything with. It didn't even want to stick to the paper, so I threw the jar away and used another texture paste instead. I added the paste to various spots on the page, and I tried not to pull the paste out to the corners of the stencil since I wanted to avoid getting sharp edges. My little helper here also added a few pieces of tape to the page, and that will give the finished piece some added interest. And if you're wondering about the color already on the page when I started, it is just leftover ink from old pages, and in this case mostly ink that had been on stencils. I wiped the leftover ink from my stencils by pressing them in between two pages in my journal most of the time. I think this gives me a nice start next time I'm making something, because having a completely blank page can sometimes be a little bit intimidating. After the texture paste was reasonably dry, I pulled out my spray mists from Dylusions and we colored the page in red and blue. When these two shades mix, they also make a really pretty purple. My original idea here was that the texture paste would be some sort of resist and that the white color would show through when I sprayed it with water. But as usual, I'm too impatient to wait until things dry completely, and therefore the texture paste was still wet enough to allow the sprayings to soak into it. So I didn't really get the effect I was going for, but there's still enough difference in shade that I'm happy with the result. When the spray inks had dried, it was clear that the tape barely took up any color at all, and I don't like the look of that, so I pulled out some black acrylic paint and covered the tape with that. Black goes really well with the colors of these inks, and my idea for the page sort of shifted from a bright and happy page to a darker and more galaxy-like one. And of course, no page of mine is complete without a serious fail, and this time my attempt to make a few white star-like spritzes ended up looking like I've spilled icing sugar all over the journal. That was not quite what I was going for, so instead I sprayed the page with more color and then with water to blend the white with the underlying layers, with the hope that I would end up with something decent. It actually worked out pretty okay. Then I tried adding some spritzes of gold, but these spray inks are so annoyingly hard to use since they always clog up and refuse to spray. So I just pulled the thing apart and splattered the gold onto the page instead. I also did the same thing with the white in order to get some star-like splatters that I had intended in the first place. And here I'm using another stencil. This one is from Holtz, and I'm spraying it with black Dylusions spray ink. The background was still a bit too watery to really make these images show up, but I'm just going with it and adding more black to the page to darken it some more. I wasn't a fan of the edges of the page, so to frame this a little bit I used the black acrylic paint to color the edges. I'm using a palette knife to get a more rough feeling to it all, and I wasn't planning on adding any black to the center of the page, but as you can see, someone else had other ideas, and I don't mind, so we're going with that look now. Then my helper came up with the idea of using an old plastic cup of white paint from one of the acrylic pours that I did recently, so we dipped the cup in white and added some circles onto the page. And then we used the leftover paint and diluted it with water to make it runnier so we could splatter it onto the page. I also had some cups of metallic paint standing on my table, and I guess they were a little bit too interesting to leave alone, and we ended up splattering some of that paint onto the page as well. These paints were already diluted with water since they had been used for a pour as well. I think they added a nice effect to the page, and their brightness and shine goes very well with the black and the muted pinks in the background. I never planned on using them, but they fit well with the galaxy effect that I was going for. And then I just waited for the page to dry completely and added some doodles and some text with a white acrylic marker to finish the page off. I quite like how it turned out, but more than anything we had a lot of fun while making it, and I feel like that's the most important thing. So I hope you like it, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you do, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.